Every day, construction workers use many pieces of equipment. Among the equipment used are lifting devices, such as aerial and scissor lifts, designed to elevate personnel to a working height. Lifts can cause serious injuries if not used by trained individuals. Knowing how to properly and safely use these lifts is an essential part of any workplace safety program. The purpose of this video is to help train employees who use aerial lift and scissor lift devices to perform elevated work. We will discuss various types of aerial lift devices, scissor lifts, pre-start inspections, proper safety equipment, safety procedures, training, and more. The contents of this video are as follows: definitions of lifts, OSHA standards, types of aerial lifts, scissor lifts, training requirements, selecting the right lift, inspections, safety procedures for aerial and scissor lifts, specific safety procedures for aerial lifts, specific safety procedures for scissor lifts, fall protection, shutdown procedure. Aerial devices are used extensively in a variety of locations. They are defined as a vehicle-mounted device, telescoping or articulating, or both, which is used to position personnel. A bucket truck is a good example of an aerial device. An aerial lift is defined as any aerial device used to elevate personnel to job sites above ground, including extensible boom platforms, aerial ladders, articulating boom platforms, and vertical towers. A self-propelled aerial lift, such as a telescoping arm lift, is considered an aerial lift. A scissor lift is a mobile supported scaffold which can be powered or unpowered, is portable, and caster or wheel mounted. Scissor lifts are common in indoor construction. While aerial lifts and scissor lifts are similar in function and use, there are distinct differences and standards for operation and safe use. OSHA recognizes these differences and applies different standards to these lifts. This video will make those distinctions known as appropriate for training purposes. OSHA covers the use of aerial lifts in CFR 1926.453 and 1926.454, which is part of the vehicle standard. OSHA classifies scissor lifts as mobile scaffolds and covers them under CFR 1926.451, 1926.452W, and 1926.454. The use of appropriate fall protection is required when using both lift devices. Aerial lifts include several types of vehicle-mounted aerial devices used to elevate employees to job sites above ground. An extensible boom platform uses a single arm to lift a platform to the desired height, often by hydraulics or, less frequently, pneumatic pressure. The length of the arm limits the reach of the boom lift. Some boom lifts can extend the reach by using telescoping sections within the arm. An aerial ladder is an aerial device consisting of a single or multiple section extensible ladder. These ladders are those most often used by fire departments. An articulating boom platform operates in much the same way as the normal boom lift, except that it has at least one joint in the arm. This joint allows the arm to be twice as long. Some are capable of rotating on an axis at the base or even on the second arm. The second arm can extend horizontally as well as vertically to reach over crowded and difficult areas. Vertical towers are aerial devices designed to elevate a platform in a substantially vertical axis. Scissor lifts are another common type of aerial working platform. The lift works much like a pair of scissors. The parts that elevate the platform contain crossing, interlocking members. When pressure is applied to the outside of the lowest set of supports through hydraulic, pneumatic, or mechanical means, the crossing supports lengthen to raise the platform. Scissor lifts usually cannot reach as high as a boom, although some may reach up to 40 or 50 feet high. OSHA requires training for aerial lifts and scissor lifts according to CFR 1926.454. Employers should train operators, employees that work on aerial lifts, and other personnel as necessary. It is important never to attempt to use a lift without being properly trained on its use and its shortcomings. Training should include the nature of any lift hazards, electrical hazards, fall hazards and falling object hazards in the work area, the correct procedures for dealing with electrical hazards and for erecting, maintaining, and disassembling the fall protection systems and falling object protection systems being used, the correct procedures for moving, operating, repairing, inspecting, and maintaining the type of lift in question, proper use of the lift, and proper handling of the materials on the lift, the maximum intended load and the load carrying capacity of the lift used, and any additional requirements set by the manufacturer. The employer is required to document the training and give the training on a periodic basis. Employers must ensure that employees are familiar with the lift they are asked to use. Employees must be provided with an operator's manual and a maintenance manual for the lift being used. Employees should become familiar with the manual before operating the lift. All employees who operate lifts must demonstrate that they understand how to use the lift. Any employee who does not understand the lift or the skill or understanding needed for safe operation must be retrained. In addition, employees must be retrained if any of the following situations occur: where changes in the worksite present a hazard which was not previously known to the employee, changes in the type of lift, fall protection, falling object protection, or other equipment present a hazard which was not previously known to the employee, where inadequacies in an affected employee's work involving any lift indicate that the employee has not retained the requisite proficiency. Operators of lifts should also be trained in fall protection in addition to operations of the machine. The fall protection requirements are shown later in this video. Training records should be maintained for at least 4 years and must contain the following information at a minimum: names of employees trained, retrained, and familiarized, name of the trainer or trainers, training covered, date of training, written records of all inspections and repairs to the lifts. When selecting a lift, there are many important issues that must be considered. Among these issues are the type of work being performed. Examine all aspects of the job prior to selecting a lift. Choose a lift with the requirements in mind. Does the work require compressed air, electrical outlets, water supply, racks, welding support, etc.? Examine the ground terrain where the lift will be operated. Is it level or not? And finally, determine the number of employees that will be using the lift. Make sure that the number of employees never exceeds the weight capacity for which the lift was designed. There are 2 main inspections that must be done when using an aerial lift device. A pre-start operation inspection of the lift must be performed before each use, and an inspection of the surrounding worksite in which the lift will be utilized. The pre-start inspection includes a list of items that should be inspected before use. The manufacturer provides much of this information in the operator's manual. Read and understand all aspects of the operator's manual. If you don't understand, ask your supervisor for clarification. Controls should never be forced from one position to another. Always inspect the boom for damage and/or any signs of weakness. If the lift is insulated, make sure it is dry and free of grease or oil. Check the guardrails. They should be free of damage and at the proper heights. Check the hydraulic system for possible leaks and the fluid level for proper amount of fluid. Outriggers should work properly and should always be set. Emergency stop buttons should work correctly. Tires must be properly inflated and inspected for damage. All safety guards should be checked for malfunctions. Check balance sensors, level sensors controls, lights, interlock devices, backup alarm, and intercom for proper operation. The emergency descent system should be checked by raising the platform a couple of feet and then turning the lift off and using the auxiliary power to lower the lift. It is necessary to always inspect the work site prior to using the lift. The ground on which the lift will be used needs to be solid and as level as possible. Do not use a lift on unstable ground. Hazards that may create dangerous driving conditions, such as overhead power lines, holes, drop-offs, bumps, lumber, tools, and debris, must be identified, and procedures to avoid any hazards made known to all employees. OSHA requires personnel to maintain at least a 10-foot clearance of all power lines with less than 50 kilovolts. If a power line has more than 50 kilovolts, additional distance is required. Employees should consult with their supervisor to determine the proper distance needed. Electricians have different guidelines and should consult with their employers concerning this issue. Weather conditions must be considered before using any lift. Additional inspections may be required by the manufacturer. These usually are to be performed every 3 months or 150 hours of operation, whichever comes first. These inspections should only be done by a licensed professional. Most lifts are equipped with various safety features. Never remove, bypass, or use these safety features for any reason other than specified by the manufacturer. Never modify a lift without written permission from the manufacturer or other qualified entity. If modified, the lift must be at least as safe as before modification. Employers should also be aware of local and state regulations and ensure compliance with those laws. Only authorized and trained persons should operate an aerial lift. Never tie off to an adjacent pole, structure, or piece of equipment while working from a lift. Personnel should always stand firmly on the floor of the lift. Never sit or climb on the basket or guardrails, or use planks, ladders, or other items to attain a higher work position. If additional height is needed, then the lift should be extended, or if necessary, a different lift used that is appropriate for the job. The lift operator should know the total load of the lift, including tools, supplies, and other employees. The weight of the load should be within the manufacturer's suggested maximum safe working load. Make sure the load is balanced. Always check the loading prior to operating the lift. A manufacturer's load plate is attached to the lift. Never use a lift as a crane unless the manufacturer has designed it to lift loads in such a manner. Hard hats should be worn by personnel at all times while operating and working from a lift or working near a lift. Fall protection is also required. Before moving the lift, all personnel in the immediate area should be made aware of the move. The operator should always refer to the manufacturer's operation manual for other safety and operation procedures specific to the lift. Brakes must be set, and if the lift has outriggers, they must be positioned on pads or on a solid surface. If the lift is operated on a slight incline, wheel chocks must be installed. Only use wheel chocks if they can be used safely. An aerial truck should not be moved when the boom is elevated in a working position with personnel in the basket unless the lift is specifically designed for such operation. Aerial work platforms must have both platform and lower controls. Platform controls must be in or beside the platform within easy reach of the operator. Lower controls should be able to override the platform controls, but should not be used unless permission has been obtained from the personnel in the lift or in case of emergency. Before moving, the boom must be properly cradled and outriggers must be stowed in position. If transferring from the lift platform to an adjacent structure is necessary, 100% tie-off is required. To perform the transfer, 2 lanyards are required. One must be anchored to the platform and the other to the structure. To facilitate the transfer, the platform must be within 1 foot of the structure. A person on the ground familiar with the lift should guide the operator when transporting the lift from one area to another on the work site. The operator must make sure that the boom is never over an individual that is on the ground. Personnel should never ride on a scissor lift unless the following conditions exist. The surface on which the lift is being moved is within 3 degrees of level and free of pits, holes, and obstructions. The height to base width ratio of the lift during movement is 2:1 or less, unless the lift is designed and manufactured to meet or exceed recognized stability test requirements such as ANSI, SIA A92.5, and A92.6. The lift does not travel more than 1 foot per second, and no one is on any part of the lift which extends outward beyond the wheels. Fall protection is required for all personnel that perform work on a lift if they are going to be elevated to a height of 10 feet above a lower level. If the lift is used according to manufacturer's guidelines and all safety precautions are followed, the chance of a fall is minimized. All scissor lifts require fall protection. Guardrails that are properly designed, maintained, and meet OSHA guardrail requirements are sufficient fall protection. If the guardrail does not meet OSHA standards, or if an employee leaves the safety of the work platform, then a personal fall arrest system utilizing a full body harness is required. All aerial lifts require fall protection. Guardrails and buckets provide some fall protection, but due to the catapulting characteristic of lifts, it is necessary to have additional fall protection. A full body harness should be worn and a lanyard attached to the boom or basket when working from an aerial lift. The length of the lanyard must conform to the lift manufacturer's guidelines. Most lifts contain a restraining point which is designed to attach to a personal fall arrest system or restraining device. If no anchor point is available, it is up to the on-site job supervisor to determine the best point to tie off. Tie off to an adjacent structure is never allowed due to the possibility of being pulled out when the lift is moved. Your employer and the manufacturer of the lift in use will provide more precise fall protection rules and guidelines. Manufacturer's guidelines must always be followed. The first step is to ensure that the lift is lowered and safely resting on its support. If the lift is not on its supports, damage may occur to the lift as well as create a tipping risk while being transported. Always secure the lift to its supports while transporting it. This keeps the lift stable and minimizes the risk of unwanted movement. Raise the outriggers if the lift has them. Shut off the power supply to the lift and outriggers. Remove pads used for outriggers and wheel chocks. Remove the key from the ignition to prevent any unauthorized use of the lift. Check the operator's manual for any additional procedures. Using a lift can be dangerous and risky. Lifts are a very useful time-saving tool in the construction industry today, allowing workers to get into areas otherwise inaccessible. However, lifts can be dangerous in untrained and unauthorized hands. Before you use a lift, you must be trained in its proper use. Always use fall protection while using a lift. Finally, if you don't understand any part of the lifting procedure, a lift's operation, or its safety features, ask your supervisor. The accident you prevent may be your own.